Introducing Bluehost Cloud, ultra-fast WordPress hosting with 100% uptime. Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Of course you do. And now you can have all three with Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost. With 100% uptime and incredibly speedy load times, your WordPress websites will be dependable and lightning fast on a global scale. Plus, your sites can handle even the biggest traffic spikes without going down or lagging. And with Bluehost Cloud, you get 24/7 WordPress priority support, meaning you're connected to WordPress experts anytime you need them. Not to mention, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. So, what are you waiting for? Get Bluehost Cloud today by visiting Bluehost.com. That's Bluehost.com.
Welcome back to another episode of Investies. I'm your host, Linda Garcia. I just got back a few hours ago from Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, and it was one of the most majestic places I have ever been to. And I have to say that for me, it felt as majestic as Honolulu, Hawaii. It was such a magical place. And I got to take a break that was much needed with my family. But I do have to say that I did start to get homesick. I am so glad to be back. And one of the things that I missed the most was just having my pulse on economic data, having my pulse on the stock market, which is really, I think, jarring for me to reflect on. I took a hardcore pivot into this space 5 years ago, and I think I'm just still surprised with how much I enjoy learning about the space and how much I enjoy sharing information about the space. It is something that is really unexpected for me, and I think it really puts into perspective our personal limitations that we have on exploring spaces that are outside of our comfort zone and what we may or may not find in those spaces. To go from a place like Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, and yet still feel the longing of wanting to be processing economic data. We also just kicked off earnings season last week. And to truly feel like I'm missing what is currently taking place in the economy, I think really puts where I am in life into perspective. A perspective that I have to admit I'm still grappling with. It's like my mind can't catch up or fully process why I am so attracted to the economy. All this to say that I missed you all and I am so happy to be back. With that being said, however, I do not have a new episode for you this week. We are going to again revisit an older episode where I talk about how immigration is detrimental to the economy. We did just get some new updated data on immigrants. I wanted to share this new updated data as well as older data that I shared back in April on the contribution of immigrants to this economy. I think that this is really important for us to revisit, most especially given that one of the points on Trump's campaign is to have mass deportation. It's important for us to understand the consequences of what can potentially take place if mass deportation actually happens. Recent data is showing that the U.S. economy has been strong because of both unauthorized and authorized immigration. We have been witnessing strong job reports, and we have also been witnessing a strong GDP, which has been the contributing factor to a strong economy. Goldman Sachs sent out a note to their investors stating, "Recent immigrants have flowed disproportionately into the parts of the labor force that were particularly tight in 2022. contributing to labor supply in places where it was most badly needed. And then we had a chief economist, Mark Zandi, state on CNBC, the immigration surge poses lots of challenges to communities across the country, but it came at a very fortuitous time to help ease the labor market pressure when the Fed was working hard to do it by interest rate hikes. Zandi goes on to credit immigration with helping the United States maintain a positive GDP. He says, it has reduced the need for more rate hikes and probably has been critical to ensuring that the economy has avoided a recession. In addition to these two statements, we recently heard from the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. We've seen labor force supply come up quite a bit through immigration, through recovering participation. This really isn't a surprise, as I've been looking at all of the data coming in from the job reports, and it makes perfect sense given that in almost every single job report that I have seen in the last several years, the biggest sector that is contributing to the jobs reports is hospitality. And as we know, most hospitality workers are, in fact, immigrants. If Trump is elected for another term, he has pledged that he will conduct mass deportation between 15 and 20 million immigrants. We really have to stop and think how this is going to begin to impact the economy. Now, given that he positions himself as pro-economy, what will actually happen if he is elected, I think, is a speculation for another day. We have to be responsible as voters and take what he is saying at face value. I leave you with an episode from April 5th on additional information on why immigrants are detrimental to the United States of America. We'll be back next week with a brand new, fresh episode. My frustration over time has increased with monetary policy and what I feel is the lack of democratic representation when it comes to fiscal responsibility. We see Republicans as being fiscally responsible, and I really feel like this narrative and the perspective needs to change. These are topics that we have been having in our investing community In Luz We Trust on Patreon for over 4 years now. And so naturally, when conversations involve economics and economic stimulation in the political space that I am stepping into, I gravitate towards it. Most especially when the constituents in the district that I will be representing in 2025 have a per capita income of $24,000 a year. $24,000 is so close to poverty. I find it crucial to continue my education in understanding the economic issue in Texas. While I have been a student and dedicated to learning for years on what this means on a national level, it is important for me to understand the impact on a state level. Yesterday, I joined a North Texas business roundtable titled Here to Work. I went not to contribute to the conversation, but to listen and to learn. I wanted to share with you all today some of the takeaways and also some of the perspective that I have. These elected officials included Congressman Mark Vesey, who was at one point a substitute teacher, a sports writer, and a writer for an advertising agency. It also included State Representative Terry Mesa, who worked as a high school teacher. She also operated an independent legal practice. And then another contributor to the roundtable was State Representative Ramon Romero, who has been a 30-year entrepreneur in the construction sector. Representative Ramon Romero made a really strong contribution to the conversation, and I'm going to attribute this to him being an entrepreneur for the last 30 years and getting to see firsthand the issues on economics and immigration. His passion that I can contribute to his understanding firsthand was really palpable and I think solidified my perspective on the need for diversity from elected officials. I was excited to listen to the contributions at the roundtable, not only of those of our elected officials, but also of folks that were there serving as testimony, sharing their own personal experience. There were also presidents and CEOs of the various Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I'm going to get into the immigration part of this conversation and what that has to do with economic stimulation. And we're back. I'm going to give you some numbers here that are going to really paint the picture and help you understand why immigration is an economic solution and why we should focus less on it being a political issue. In the state of Texas in January of 2024, there were over 781,000 non-farm job openings. Every time you hear the term non-farm, that just means it is work that does not contribute to the farming sector. It's important for us to understand the GDP growth that takes place in the state of Texas. By the way, GDP means gross domestic product. We've talked about GDP several times on this podcast. It's how we measure growth. GDP growth for Texas in the United States ranks number 2. California being number 1, New York coming in as 3rd, and Florida, 4th. Ultimately, what this means is that these locations are where the most growth is produced in the United States. And so these are extremely desirable locations for immigrants. Not to mention that if we were to measure the GDP growth of Texas amongst the world, it is ranked number 8. And to put all of this into perspective, California's global GDP is ranked 5th, New York is ranked 10th, and Florida is ranked 14th. In North Texas alone, we have 575,000 long-term undocumented immigrants. These folks have already been integrated into our systems. We have population to fill job openings. Having 781,000 job openings are too many openings. We have to move towards a solution in filling these job openings. And we can begin to do that with making processes and resources available for undocumented immigrants. The United States is dependent on the state of Texas, California, New York, and Florida to continue its GDP growth so that we can sustain our rank globally. You always hear Republicans saying that immigrants are going to take jobs away from Americans. But if we actually look at the data, you can see this just isn't true. Immigrants are not taking our jobs. In fact, what they are doing is picking the food that sits on our table and building the shelter over our heads. However, if we stop immigrants from coming into this country, we will be stopping our growth as a country. And to stop our growth will eventually mean to lose our power. Our most recent evidence of immigrants not wanting to take our jobs goes back to the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. Immigrants make up less than 10% in Baltimore, and yet All of the folks that were working on that bridge were immigrants from Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Mexico. I don't know of one person, one citizen, that has the legal right to vote that actually wants to be working on potholes in the middle of the night in 40-degree weather. We tried to research how much our immigrant workers were getting paid the night that they died on that bridge. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find that information anywhere. One of their colleagues, Jesus Campos, who works for the company, did state that they are low-income families. No surprise there that our comforts, like bridges, houses, food on our table, are all coming from unprotected, low-income families. What I can find, however, is how much it will cost to rebuild this bridge. And it's important for us to understand that the bridge will be built on the backs of immigrants. Aside from the fact that the actual jobs that are available are jobs that we do not want to do, the other massive issue is the lack of increase in population. We are not having children. I found a press release from the U.S. Census Bureau. The press release is dated from November of 2023, and it is titled, U.S. Population Projected to Begin Declining in the Second Half of the Century. This is a projected issue, and this is the first time that the U.S. Census Bureau looks this deep into the future since 2000. They have laid out 3 scenarios in this press release. The first scenario is a high immigration scenario. The second scenario is a low immigration scenario. And the third scenario is a zero immigration scenario, which is currently what Republicans are fighting for. The high immigration scenario is projecting a population increase to reach 435 million by year 2100. In the low immigration scenario, population is projected to peak at around 346 million in 2043 and decline thereafter. In the zero immigration scenario, the population declines would start in 2024. This is the complete absence of foreign-born immigration, and it is currently what Republicans are fighting for. We must acknowledge the significance of immigrants and their contributions to our country. Unfortunately, hate and racism have clouded our judgment, preventing us from recognizing their valuable contributions. Rather than focusing on long-term solutions or identifying long-term issues, we use race as a political tactic to gain votes. Our focus is purely egotistical, and we fail to see the bigger picture. The request here isn't to have an open border frenzy. The request here is to have a proper process in place so that we can begin to find a solution to the problem of having so many job openings in this country that we ourselves as citizens do not want to be a part of. Representative Romero's take on the immigration issue at the roundtable was truly enlightening. His employees, who have gained years of experience in construction, have unfortunately been deported, causing a loss in qualified workers for his company. This has resulted in him having to contend with increased expenses and difficulty in him finding qualified workers, which ultimately affects the citizens of Texas. This ongoing busing of immigrants out of the state by Abbott only exasperates the situation. This type of perspective and advocacy can play a significant role in finding a solution for immigrants in our country. And this is why it is so important for us to elect officials with diverse backgrounds and experiences. If you are an entrepreneur and you identify with the need of having immigrants legally in this country to stimulate the economy, then there will be a link located in the description of this podcast. Join the hundreds of entrepreneurs across the United States that have already signed this letter to President Biden. I want to give a special thank you to the American Business Immigration Coalition Action for hosting this roundtable, bringing up important points and identifying actions that we can take today in order to make it possible for immigrants to work legally in this country. You're listening to Investies, a Cosmic Standard and In Luz We Trust production. A special thank you to the team, Asia Simpson, Eliza Smith, and Jacob Winnick.